On the topic of war, it may be a ridiculous span of time and scale, but how do you think the world wars of the 20th century compare to the wars that we've been talking about of the Roman Empire, of Greece, and so on?
I mean, what's interesting about some of the Roman civil wars, particularly, is that they are world wars of the time.
Hmm.
So let's take the war after the assassination of Julius Caesar. We've talked about that one a lot. That was fought, there were battles there fought in Spain, in North Africa, in Greece, in Egypt, in Italy. I mean, truly across the entire breadth of the Mediterranean, involving at least 7 or 8 different factions of Romans. And that was the world to them. I mean, that's very similar in a way to our modern world wars, where this was a global conflict, at least as they envisioned the world they knew of. And if we sort of, I don't know, somehow factor for, transportation time, I mean, I think you can argue that that was a bigger war than World War II. I mean, in World War II, if you hopped on a plane, you could get from the US to China in, I don't know, a week or something, right? In little hops. I mean, in the ancient world, if you wanted to go from Spain to Egypt, it would take you a month.
Mm-hmm.
So they were fighting across a larger space-time zone in terms of their technology to move than World War II took place
So in some
across.
sense, World War II was quite
Smaller.
contained.
Yeah. I mean, if we adjust for that sort of factor, so that was a global war, and I think that would be very familiar.
How do you think the atomic bomb, nuclear weapons change war?
Yeah, I mean, now we can destroy the world and truly kind of destroy civilizations wholesale. And that does seem to be a new thing. I mean, no matter what the Romans did, they didn't have that choice, that ability to think, I can do something that will end, life as we know it, at least on the planet. And that's a very different perspective. And it's, I think, weird and interesting moment right now. I mean, I'm getting way beyond ancient history here, but for a long time we had this sort of stasis with the nuclear standoff, with mutually assured destruction between the U.S. sort of block of nations and the Soviet ones, and it worked. And now we're entering this kind of time when a lot more countries are going to start becoming nuclear capable. We might have a resurgence of just building new weapons platforms, with China seems very eager to expand their nuclear arsenal in all sorts of ways. So it's a unnerving time, let's say, right now.
And it's a terrifying experiment to find out if nuclear weapons, when a lot of nations have nuclear weapons, is that going to enforce civility and peace?
Yeah.
Or is it actually going to be destabilizing and ultimately civilization destroying?
Right. I mean, it was weirdly stable when it was a bipolar world where you had just sort of those two blocks. Now with a multipolar world with access to these weapons, I don't know. I mean, we're kind of jumping out of the ancient world, but I'll tell you one thing that's always fascinated me in this sort of comparison of ancient and modern is how people don't learn the lessons of the past in military history. And the very specific example that in my lifetime I've seen play out twice is just certain places people make the same mistakes over and over again. So a nice example is Afghanistan, or roughly that sort of northern Pakistan / into what is Afghanistan. I mean, that is a geographic region that over and over again, the best, most sophisticated armies in the world have invaded and have met horrible failure. And that goes all the way back to, Alexander the Great tried to conquer that area. The Mongols tried to do it. The Huns tried to do it. The Mughals tried to do it. Victorian Britain tried to do it. The Russians tried to do it. The Americans tried to do it. And they made the very same mistakes over and over and over again. And the two mistakes are not understanding the terrain, that it's a rocky, mountainous area that people can always hide in caves, and it's not understanding the fundamentally tribal nature of that area, that's where the real allegiance is in these tribes. It's not in a centralized government. And that's the same error Alexander made, as, the British made in the 19th century, as the Russians, as the Americans. And it's so depressing as a historian who studies history to see these things being repeated over and over again, and you know exactly what's going to happen.
For leaders not to be learning lessons of history.